very long story short, having a beer with a band that had had a falling out with their manager and had a bunch of festivals coming up, and I, after a few beers, said, well, do you need someone to help? And they said, maybe. And I said, great, well, I'll do it then. And they said, okay, and then embarked on probably the most terrifying 3 months of my life and decided I never wanted to do it again, and here I am.
How many years later?
10.
I have always loved music. I grew up, wanted to play drums, and then I actually didn't want to go to university. And my dad was like, you got to go to uni, and I was like, oh. And I was like, what if I do drums at uni? And he was like, no, just do something like business related. And I was like, okay, music business. And he was like, oh, fine, all right, we'll agree on that. So I went and I did a music business course at university, and it was when I did that, I saw a side of music that I'd never really thought about. Like, obviously I knew there was a business, but I learned so much about just about how it all works. Like, and it was like a little insight, but I just got so excited by it all. And I was a drummer, and I met this guy, and he was like, oh, I'm a backline tech. And I was like, oh yeah. He's like, yeah, can you tune drums? I was like, yeah, I can tune drums. I definitely couldn't tune drums. I could play them quite well, but I couldn't tune that well. And he was like, oh, I reckon I've got you a gig. It's free. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, he's like, it's experience. And I was like, let's do it. So I started working for this artist for free, just getting experience. And I learned the ropes, and I learned the way of touring through that. And then I kind of built my way up the ladder, as it were, as a drum tech and backline tech, and did that for a few artists and a few years. And then one time I was on a tour, and it was all just going pear-shaped. And the manager just looked at me, and he was like, out of everyone in this room, you're the only one that really knows what's going on around here. Like, he was like, you seem like a natural manager. He was like, would you be interested in being a tour manager? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome, let's try it. And then that was 2017, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, a little bit like everyone, I fell into it by accident. Mm-hmm. I started out, I used to live on the east coast of Canada in a small city called Halifax. It has a really, really strong music community, but it's a bit of a smaller city, smaller community, but very, very tight-knit, and everyone kind of supports each other and helps each other. So you'll see a Juno winning artist on stage one day, and then the next day they're working the door for a friend's show, that kind of thing. And so I just naturally fell into that as well, and started jumping in to work the door or sell merch or, kind of whatever was needed. And at a certain point I was working as a publicist for a small festival, and I had one of the headlining artists was taking her for all of her press for the day, and she had kind of classic, she had a sound like a front of house TM combo, but he was actually just a front of house tech and not really a TM. And the whole day, anytime she would ask, oh, what time do I have to be there, or where do I have to go for, I always had the answer. I just knew her schedule. I knew, I was on top of it. She started jokingly calling me tour manager, and she would say, oh, thanks, tour manager. Thanks, tour manager. I didn't even know what that was. I'd never heard of that before. But I thought, oh, well, if this is tour management, kind of love it, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I had a couple of fortuitous conversations and ended up interning at a music management company in Toronto with an artist manager who had started her career as a tour manager. And then, kind of went from there and got on the road, and the rest is history. Amazing. But if it wasn't for that one day with her, I don't know if I would even have known that this career existed. So
I never really knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an actress, but I can't sing, I can't dance, I'm terrified of speaking in public. So I'd have been a really terrible actress. So I went to LIPA and studied music and entertainment management. And then when I was there, we had a placement. So I went to Talyard Recording Studios and did an internship. And then when I was on my internship, they said, do you want to go on the road and sell T-shirts? And I was like, sure, I can sell merch. No problem. Had no clue what I was doing. Absolutely none. And never came off the road. I literally went from tour to tour to tour. And I don't mind me asking, how long ago was that? But that was 12 years ago. Yeah. And kind of never went back. Didn't even, for my third year of uni, it was in Liverpool, and I stayed in London and commuted as and when I wasn't on the road, and finished my degree, and there's literally never came off the road. I was sick of corporate music. When I say corporate music, I mean like record labels and that sort of thing. So I did a degree in music business and always wanted to kind of work in the corporate side, and then found that actually working in corporate music was not very fun, and realised that I did a lot of festivals and live stuff when I was at uni, just for, extra pocket money on the side. And I never considered it really as like a viable career option, because I hated the idea of being freelance and worrying, what if I don't have work on, and all those things, but realised, I have to at least give it a go, right? So took the leap, left corporate, and I've never looked back. I've just been working in live ever since, and I'm still here, so love it.
I was a sound guy. I've always been in bands. I've always played in bands and been the guy that recorded bands. And then I started doing sound for bands. And this one band I really liked, I asked them if they needed someone to go on tour, and I want to tour them. And then their manager, I was going to go on tour with them, and then their manager asked me, "Will you tour manage?" And I was like, "Yes." And then I called my friend who was on the label, on a Sub Pop at the time, and I said, "Hey man, what does tour managing mean?" So I tour managed that tour, and I had no idea what the heck I was supposed to do. But this was back in the telephone days too, so I advanced the shows and I did the thing. But the band skyrocketed very soon after that, so we moved on to getting a real tour manager, and I learned a lot from him. And then soon after that, I started doing this dual role thing that was a hot commodity for bands, because they get two for one. Yep. So I think being a short answer is I'm an organized sound guy who also was kind of an office jerk, and in his post college years. So I was really good with spreadsheets, and I was good with people. I've always been a manager of something, from like the pizza place I worked in college, in high school, to the offices I've worked in. I've always kind of been good with people, and I've enjoyed that. So I think it worked out really well. And I like people because I'm an only child, so I like being part of a group. Yep. And that is an addictive thing, I think, to this world of touring with a band, because you get into a group on a tour, and it's so intimate. You're like part of the family. Yeah. And I love being part of a family, because my family's really small, and that's rewarding. Yeah. Amazing. It can be a little slippery though, because you feel like you're part of something, but then you realize you're actually not. I mean, you are, but you're actually just working for these people. So that depending on the artist or person or people or crew that you're with, that you've got to kind of be conscious of that. Yeah. But I'm a giver. I give myself right away, and sometimes most of the time that works out really well.
I grew up as a punter. Okay. So rather than being a sports kid, I was a music kid. Mm-hmm. I think I probably went to like over 100 concerts before I was 18. Mm-hmm. And I always looked at everyone who was in black running around, and I was like, how do I be that? I want to do that. Mm-hmm. I also just love traveling, so I feel like it was a really great intersection of what I wanted in my life. And I think just knowing the feeling that I get when I go to a show of my favorite artist, I wanted to be able to provide that for other people. It was the only thing that really felt like I was providing purpose. Mm-hmm. Like, it just felt really fulfilling for me. So it's the only thing that I've ever really found a lot of joy in. Mm-hmm.
I think like most tour managers, you don't set out to be a tour manager. I mean, we all start in a different department. I'm a sound engineer, so I'm a front of house engineer. I started in radio with the BBC and then progressed through to live. And then there gets to be that point where it's really easy to look. Early days of touring, I'm talking about the mid-80s. So it's, touring was in, well, I'd still think it was in its infancy in the 80s. It was a very different thing to what it is now. But there's always that thing where you look at everyone else, you go, I could do that. So yeah, you're mixing front of house, but then the tour manager's running around and you go, And there comes that point where you get it started to get bands where they're going, well, we can't afford to pay for a sound guy and a tour manager. Some bands were like, I'm not really sure what a tour manager does, and of course that's always the argument. So then basically I morphed into a tour manager through the front of house system. So it was like, well, I can do that as well while I'm doing this. So, and you tended to find out, I mean, there are a number, there's a number of people I know that became production managers out from drum techs to production managers. I don't think you ever start out to be that in those days. I don't think so. You never started out to be a production manager or a tour manager. You just morphed into it. It was like, oh, the guy's not available. So, well, I can do that, and I'll do this as well. So you split your time. It works financially on the smaller sort of club theatre tours, and that's really how I progressed. That was it, into the tour management. And I did front of house and TM up until probably about 10, 12 years ago, and then I sort of stopped because of the level of tours got so high. When I say so high, I mean that sounds really pompous. They got to the point where it wasn't possible to do both. However, in the 90s I was doing Alice Cooper front of house and tour management. You then have to rely on some of your other team, because obviously you can't get the band on and off stage, but you've got a production manager to do that. But then sort of leaving venues and you're trying to wrap up sound, etc, etc, etc. So you have to cut a few corners here and there. And then physically and mentally it becomes too much to be able to do both jobs. Some people can handle it, because you really want, I want to do really good sound. I don't need to be thinking about whether the buses are in place or the cars are in place to take them back to the hotel and things like that. You want to think about that later, because you're thinking about this job, so you really have to compartmentalise things. So as some of the jobs got bigger and bigger, it was like just some of the things just go to one side, and then you become a full-time tour manager like I am now. So that's really how it morphed, as I say, mid-80s all the way to now. So
amazing. So we're not going to do the math there and calculate how many years you've been on the road.
Probably nearly 40.
I did lots of events and festivals and stuff in Scotland. So I did things like the big Hogmanay thing, Tea in the Park, all that kind of thing, and decided then that I would really like to go on tour. And a friend of mine was working with Riverdance at the time. This was 1999. And she said, oh, they're looking for people to come on tour. And I applied and I got the job. So that was the start for me, was touring with Riverdance at the sort of peak of its existence. It was it was a great grounding, because there was like over 100 people. So moving that amount of people was a really good start.
Probably my love to care for people, to take care of people, and knowing that I would be in a position to have a positive impact. I think having so many rough experiences as a crew member, knowing that in the position of a TM, I could ensure that someone else has a smoother journey in their experience.
I'm in this industry more than 20 years, like it's 23 years actually.
Wow.
And I think life got me there. I was working in the industry as a production assistant, and then production executive, and I was running in national gigs and in festivals, and I still do festivals in my country. I'm from Greece, by the way, and it was a little bit of a coincidence because we were working back then with an American band very often. We brought them in Greece, and we had like some tour dates for them in Greece, like more than 1, 2, 3, 4, and they were keep coming back. So I was with them. I was the artist liaison, and then we just put more gigs. We did some Balkan shows, and then it comes the European shows. And because we were like familiar to each other, they knew me. I did a good job for them, and they asked me to be their tour manager. And
here you are.
And here I am. And so I was working with them for many years as a European tour manager. And now I'm tour managing for a Greek pop star. Probably he's one of the biggest in Greece right now. He's trending, he's very popular, and I work for him.
Well, much like Aid, I became a tour manager by mistake. I'd worked in Sheffield for 10 years with people with disabilities and mental health issues, and I always played in bands, so I kind of, to no commercial success, but had an idea about touring, and I've been, on tour, opening up for bigger bands coming around the UK and to the France. So I had a bit of an idea about it, and then the government changed and my project went away. So I kind of went and lived in Berlin and had a bit of fun for about 3 months. And then a musician from Texas, who I put on in Sheffield as a promoter, his tour was starting in Berlin, and he was like, "You've got a van. Let's come hang out for this German tour. It'll be a laugh." And I was like, "Yeah, all right." It's me, the manager, and him in a van. And after the first night, he's like, "You're the tour manager now." I've been faking it since then, basically.
Amazing. I wish I could say, like with most of the people in here, that was not intentional, but it was.
You chose this career.
Yeah, I have made a horrible mistake. No, I'm joking. To be fair, yes and no. I always knew I wanted to work in music. It's just been something I've discovered very early on. Like, my mum took me to a gig when I was 7, and I was like, "Oh my god, I want to live in this club. I want to be there and do whatever."
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, and it was just crazy. It was back in the times when you were allowed to smoke in a room. Crazy stuff. And I just fall in love with the entire culture of it, and I just wanted to be in that smoky room for the rest of my life, essentially. It was just like a very key moment in my life, I think, growing up. And then, I don't know, I've tried different parts of the industry. I've done festival work, working for a venue, working for promoters, loads of artist relations stuff, and eventually that kind of led me to tour management because it just sounded more me, and I was very right, it was more me, and that's kind of it, very short, long story short, I guess.
I started out in artist management and was managing a few artists in New Zealand, and I liked the thought of being on the road with my artists. I kind of didn't really want to just be across the the recorded side or what artist managers usually deal with. I was like, I want to be on the road and seeing the audiences react and the fan engagement with the artists that I was working with. So yeah, that's kind of how I started. I was just going on the tours. That I was literally planning everything for the artists, including the tours and all the releases and stuff. And then grew from there. I just really liked it being on the road, and so I was like, I want to do this more.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And how long have you been touring for, if you don't mind me asking?
I've been touring for about 5 years now. Yeah.
Oh gosh, this is a great question. Passion, leadership, the ability to say yes to everything, and be open to challenge. I think that's it. Yeah. A solution finder. Yeah, there you go.
I started DJing when I was about 12. I'd sort of got a love for the music, listening to a local radio station, and sort of was curious about it, so I got involved in that way. And started doing private functions and had local club residencies, and then I realised that I wanted to, do bigger shows, go travel, internationally and do this thing. But the gap between me doing that was I learned I had to make music, which I tried, and it just wasn't for me. So I sort of nipped that in the bud quite quickly. And then there was a local artist where I used to live who was just blowing up, who signed to Swedish House Mafia and stuff. So I started travelling with him at my own expense at the time, so that's usually how it goes. We went to some really crazy places, and then someone mentioned that you should be his tour manager, and I was like, what's tour manager? And then I started researching it and looking into it then, and then that's sort of, I got my first paid client after that, and then that's sort of how it happened.